The desert winds carried more than dust. They carried whispers. Whispers of men who vanished into darkness and emerged as ghosts of death. Whispers of a brotherhood whose very name could turn the bravest warlord pale. Whispers of the assassins, the most secretive, the most feared, and perhaps the most misunderstood society in the history of mankind. Our story begins in the late 11th century, in a land torn by conquest, faith and blood. The Crusades thundered through the Middle East, carving deep scars across ancient kingdoms. Sultans, viziers, and princes vied for power, while far in the mountains of Persia, a man named Hassan-i-Sabah was laying the foundation of something more dangerous than armies. He was not a king, he was not a general, he held no throne, no vast fortune. What Hassan possessed was sharper than any blade: knowledge, faith, and unrelenting willpower. Born in Qom around 1050, raised in the heart of Shia Islam, Hassan's path twisted between scholarship and heresy. He studied theology, astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy, delving into the esoteric doctrines of the Ismailis, a branch of Shia Islam that would brand him both visionary and heretic. By the time he reached his 30s, Hassan was not merely a man, he was a legend in the making. His followers whispered of his genius, his enemies spat curses at his name, and his rivals feared the sheer magnetism of his words. But what truly set him apart was his dream, to carve out a kingdom not of land, but of the mind. To achieve this, Hassan needed more than followers, he needed a fortress, and he found one high in the Alborz mountains of northern Persia, hidden among cliffs and clouds. Alamut. Imagine the scene: a valley swallowed by mist, a crag of stone rising like a sentinel against the sky, its jagged walls seemingly unclimbable. Alamut was not just a castle, it was a riddle of stone nearly impregnable, perched on a narrow ridge where armies would falter before they even reached the gates. Here Hassan saw not a ruin, but a sanctuary, a throne of shadow. Through cunning and guile, Hassan took Alamut, not with armies, but with strategy. Records tell us he infiltrated the fortress, gradually winning over its garrison. When the moment came, he claimed it bloodlessly, without siege or slaughter. By 1090, the mountain stronghold was his. From Alamut, Hassan built what chroniclers would later call the Nizari Ismaili state. But to outsiders it was something far stranger. Alamut became a school, a monastery, and a training ground for his most loyal disciples. Young men who would enter its walls as seekers and emerge as living weapons. They called them fidai, the devoted ones. These were not soldiers in the conventional sense. They wielded no banners, commanded no battalions. Their weapon was fear itself. Picture it: a grand vizier in Baghdad, seated in his chamber, surrounded by guards. Suddenly, one morning, a dagger is found beside his pillow. No one saw who placed it there. No one knows how it bypassed his guards, but he understands the message. The assassins have marked him. This was the genius of Hassan-i-Sabah's creation. The assassins did not need to wage wars. They did not need to conquer vast land. Instead, they struck with surgical precision. Kings, emirs, and generals fell not on battlefields, but in the heart of their courts, slain by men who vanished into the crowd, or embraced death with fanatical devotion. And here in the shadows of Alamut, a terrifying reputation began to grow. The Crusaders feared them, the Seljuks feared them, even the mighty Saladin, conqueror of Jerusalem, learned caution after escaping their blades. Chroniclers from Europe brought back stories so outlandish they blurred the line between truth and myth. They claimed Hassan drugged his followers with hashish, transporting them into gardens of paradise, only to awaken them in his fortress, promising them eternal bliss if they died in his service. It is from this tale that the very word assassin entered Western languages, a blend of hashash and hashish users, though modern historians dispute this story. Was it slander, the invention of fearful enemy, or was there a kernel of truth, that Hassan wove illusions as cunningly as he wove daggers in the dark? One thing is certain: the assassins cultivated fear like a weapon. Their kills were not random. Each assassination was a performance, staged for maximum effect. To strike a leader in public, in daylight, was to send a message that no guard, no fortress, no army could protect the powerful. Their reputation grew until it became something supernatural, an empire of shadows stretching far beyond the mountain valleys of Persia. But with such power came enemies. The Seljuk Turks, rulers of much of the Islamic world, viewed Hassan's sect as heretics and rebels. They launched repeated campaigns to crush Alamut, yet each time, they found themselves thwarted not just by stone walls, but by fear itself. Generals died mysteriously. Armies faltered, and always, the shadow of the dagger lingered. The Crusaders too recorded chilling encounters. At times they made uneasy alliances with the assassins, only to later face their wrath. When the chronicler William of Tyre described them in the 12th century, he painted a portrait of almost supernatural menace, men who struck without warning, vanished without trace, and obeyed their leader with a loyalty bordering on madness. And yet behind the terror, one wonders, who were these men truly? Were they zealots intoxicated by faith, or were they victims of a carefully constructed illusion, manipulated by Hassan's genius? Inside Alamut, records speak of gardens, libraries, and training halls. It was not merely a den of killers, it was a world of philosophy, of debate, of study. Hassan himself, the old man of the mountain, was not a warrior, but a scholar who rarely left his fortress, ruling instead through words and ideas. He forbade music, luxury, and distraction. He lived in austerity, demanding discipline and loyalty. The paradox is striking. A man who lived like a monk, yet commanded a network of killers who altered the fate of kingdoms, and so the mystery deepened. Were the assassins truly the world's most dangerous secret society, or the world's most misunderstood? Their story is written in blood and shadow. It is whispered in the ruined stones of Alamut. It is etched in the memory of rulers who lived in fear of the unseen blade. But Alamut was only the beginning, because soon the assassins would step beyond Persia, into Syria, into the very heart of the Crusader states, and there in the rocky fortresses of the Levant, they would clash with kings, crusaders, and conquerors alike. And among their many targets, one name would stand out, a man of destiny, a warrior who rose like a storm across the Middle East, Saladin. But what happened when the assassins set their eyes on him? The assassins were not just warriors, they were engineers of illusion. Imagine a man, a simple villager, or soldier, brought blindfolded into the mountain citadel of Alamut. When the cloth was lifted from his eyes, he did not find himself in a fortress of stone and iron, but in what seemed like paradise itself. Flowing streams, fragrant gardens, exotic women moving like visions of angels, and golden cups filled with wine, a taste forbidden by faith, yet here poured without consequence. Was this real, or merely an elaborate trick? The chronicles of the Crusaders, especially the writings of Marco Polo centuries later, would insist it was real. He described the assassin's leader, the enigmatic old man of the mountain, as a master of deception. By drugging his followers with hashish, and awakening them in hidden gardens designed to mimic paradise, he convinced them they had glimpsed the afterlife. The promise was simple: obey him, fight for him, and upon death, they would return to that eternal bliss. But here lies the puzzle. Were these tales true, or were they exaggerated by fearful enemies, desperate to explain how ordinary men could hurl themselves into certain death, with smiles on their faces? Some Muslim historians, like Rashid al-Din, dismissed the gardens of paradise as propaganda, a slander invented by enemies to mock the sect. Yet others admit that the assassins did wield drugs, ritual, and staged illusions to manipulate loyalty. Either way, the effect was undeniable. The assassins became an unstoppable force, their followers willing to die without hesitation. Kings, viziers, and crusader lords trembled at the mere rumor of their presence. Consider this. In an age when armies of tens of thousands clashed on open fields, the assassins fought not with legions, but with whispers, shadows, and a blade carefully placed at the throat of the powerful. They did not seek conquest of land, but control of fear, and fear spreads faster than any army. Their chosen targets were not random. Every dagger was political. Seljuk sultans, Abbasid viziers, Crusader barons, all found themselves vulnerable. One by one, they were struck down, often in public, often in daylight, so that witnesses would carry the story farther than any herald could. But here is where the story twists darker. For centuries, whispers circulated that the assassins were more than just a sect of killers. Some claimed they dabbled in forbidden knowledge, astrology, alchemy, even rituals resembling sorcery. Their leaders were said to weave secrets that blurred the lines between science and magic, control and madness. What if the assassins were not just wielding fear, but truths humanity was never meant to know? Why else did empires fear them not only as assassins, but as keepers of forbidden wisdom? Even today, ruins of their fortresses, scattered across Persia and Syria, whisper clues. Hidden chambers, carved inscriptions, secret tunnels leading to nowhere. Were these simply defensive structures, or did they serve some darker ritual purpose? And more importantly, why did so many chroniclers of their age go out of their way to exaggerate or obscure the assassin's story? Did the assassins truly drink from paradise, or are we still prisoners of the illusions they themselves created? We stand at a precipice now. Behind us, the simple story of a sect of killers. Ahead, a labyrinth of conspiracy, fear and myth, where the line between fact and nightmare grows thin. Because to understand the assassins is not merely to study their murders, but to confront the question of how far humans will go to control the minds of others. And the deeper we go, the more we must ask, were the assassins truly extinguished by sword and fire, or did their legacy survive, hidden in secret orders that still shape our world today? The assassins were not a mere military order, they were artisans of fear, and perhaps the most disturbing aspect of their power lay in how they manipulated the very psychology of their enemy. Imagine this: a mighty king, surrounded by guards, locked in a fortified palace, sleeping on a bed of gold, yet still he awoke with a dagger lying on the pillow beside his head, not thrust into his chest, not bloodied, but placed there, silently as a message. We can reach you, even in your most guarded moment. The victim lived, but his confidence did not. That was the assassin's true weapon, not the blade, but the certainty that the blade could appear anywhere, anytime. But who were these men, these shadows of history, willing to kill and to die at a whisper from their master? The term assassin itself became a thing of legend, whispered by crusaders who returned to Europe with tales of a strange sect in the mountains of Persia. Some said they derived their name from Hashushan, users of hashish, claiming that initiates were drugged, led into dreamlike gardens of paradise, and awakened to believe they had glimpsed heaven itself. To return there, they had only to obey their master's command, even unto death. Others argue that this was a slander by their enemies, a convenient way to paint them as mad fanatics. The truth, as always, lies hidden in the mist. Let us step now into their stronghold, the eagle's nest itself. Alam, perched high upon jagged cliffs, the fortress seemed less a creation of men than a crown upon the mountains. Its walls, carved into the rock, rose like an extension of the land itself, unassailable, unreachable. Within, libraries of forbidden knowledge lined its hall, maps, manuscripts, treatises on philosophy and science. This was not just a fortress, but a university of shadows. Here young initiates studied not only the art of assassination, but languages, theology, mathematics, and astronomy. Their blades were sharpened by intellect as much as by steel. But what was the cost of such knowledge? In exchange for power, they gave their very souls to the will of the old man of the mountain. Hassani Saba demanded obedience beyond reason. To disobey was death, to hesitate was dishonor, to doubt was to be cast into the abyss. And so his assassins became more than followers. They were extensions of his will, instruments of terror in a symphony of silence. And their victims, they were not chosen at random. Kings, caliphs, generals, priests, those who threatened the Nizari Ismaili sect, those who dared to oppose their creed, became marked men. But unlike ordinary killers, the assassins struck openly, often in broad daylight, surrounded by witnesses. Why? Because it was not enough to remove the target. The act itself was a performance, a message written in blood, one meant to echo through the corridors of power. One must wonder, what kind of belief could drive a man to walk calmly into death, smiling as he was cut down after the deed was done? Were they truly drugged, their minds clouded by false visions, or had they been so utterly reshaped by faith and loyalty that paradise itself seemed to await them? Even now, centuries later, the name of the assassins lingers like a curse. Writers and chroniclers, from Marco Polo to modern historians, have struggled to separate truth from legend. Some see them as ruthless murderers, terrorists of their age. Others view them as revolutionaries, striking from the shadows against tyrants who sought to crush their people. But perhaps the most terrifying possibility is this: that they were both, that the line between freedom fighter and terrorist has always been as thin as the blade of a dagger. And yet if the assassins were truly so powerful, what became of them? Why does their eagle's nest lie in ruins, their libraries turned to ash, their name reduced to whispers? Did they vanish with the fall of Alamut, crushed beneath the armies of the Mongols? Or did their methods survive, carried forward into new ages, new orders, new societies hidden in plain sight? That is the mystery that draws us deeper into the labyrinth. For every ruin leaves a shadow, every silence a question. And the assassins, though gone, left behind echoes that still haunt the corridors of power. But to understand those echoes we must peel back another layer. We must ask, was the old man of the mountain truly a religious zealot? Or was he something far more cunning, an architect of psychological warfare, centuries ahead of his time? And if so, have his methods been inherited by secret societies that shape our world even now? The shadows lengthen, the trail leads us into darker halls, and still the dagger gleams at the edge of our vision. The assassins, for all their brutality, were also master storytellers. Their legends, woven into the mountains and carried across deserts, had power beyond the dagger. Merchants whispered of them in hushed voices at caravan stops. Soldiers at watchtowers muttered their name in fear, unsure if shadows might stir in the dark. Kings and sultans feared letters sealed with their insignia more than entire armies marching against them. But the mystery deepens when we look closer, not at their killings, but at their philosophy. For behind the veil of blood, Hassan Sabah cultivated an intellectual fortress just as much as a military one. His mountain stronghold at Alamut became not just a citadel of daggers, but of books, scholars, and debate. Imagine the walls lined with manuscripts, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, mathematics. The same hands that wielded poisoned blades also turned pages of wisdom, translating Greek thinkers and Islamic theologians. It seems paradoxical, doesn't it? How could men known as ghosts in the night, slayers of kings, also be guardians of knowledge? And yet, it was this blend, the knife and the quill, that gave the assassins their power. They understood that control of the mind was as crucial as control of the body. Still, one cannot ignore the terror they wrought. Their enemies accused them of sorcery, of intoxicating their followers with hashish and illusions of paradise to ensure obedience. Hence the word that still echoes today, assassin, born from whispered tales of drugged fanatics who believed themselves already in heaven. But here lies another riddle. Was this truth, or a smear campaign by enemies desperate to explain the unshakable loyalty of the assassin? Because think of it, if you are a soldier in the 12th century, and you watch a brother-in-arms throw away his life with a smile, striking down a mighty lord, how else could you explain such madness, except by imagining drugs, magic, or promises of paradise? Yet perhaps it was something far more dangerous: belief. The assassin did not kill for coin, he killed for creed, and creed can make a man unstoppable. Now picture the Crusaders arriving in the Holy Land, knights, armored in steel, carrying banners of the cross. They expected to face armies of Saracens, deserts, fortresses, and long sieges. What they did not expect was an invisible enemy, one that could slip through the cracks of their castles and strike without warning. For the assassins did not need open war to bend the fate of nations. They only needed a single blade, delivered at the right moment. One night in 1192, the assassins made history. Conrad of Montferrat, newly elected king of Jerusalem, walked through the narrow streets of Tyre. He was a man rising to power, a crucial figure in the Crusader states. Yet two assassins disguised as monks approached him with reverence, and in an instant, their hidden daggers flashed, cutting down the king-to-be in the street. The Crusaders were thrown into chaos. Leaders panicked, alliances collapsed, and the shadow of Alamut stretched into the heart of Christendom itself. And here is the question that lingers like smoke after fire. Who ordered this death? Did the assassins act alone, enforcing their own brand of balance? Or were they tools, hired blades for Richard the Lionheart, whose ambitions may have aligned with their strike. History does not answer clearly, but the effect was undeniable. A dagger had redrawn the map of the Crusader states. Do you see the pattern? Where kings clashed with armies, where empires moved like giants, the assassins moved like spiders in the dark. One thread cut here, another tied there, until the web of history shifted. But Alamut was not eternal. Every fortress has its cracks, every shadow its dawn. The Mongols came like a storm from the east, an enemy too vast to stab in the dark. They leveled mountains, toppled cities, drowned entire kingdoms in fire. And when the Mongols turned their gaze toward the assassins, even the hidden strongholds of Persia trembled. The end of Alamut would be as dramatic as its rise. But before we descend into that final collapse, let us linger in the twilight of their reign, where the myths, the truths, and the terrors blur together, and the assassin's legend grows larger than life. Beneath the fortress, hidden tunnels wound through the rock like veins of some ancient beast. These passages were not crude holes dug by desperate men. They were carefully engineered, lined with stone and reinforced by timber. Torches lit the way in flickering intervals, creating shadows that seemed to reach out with skeletal fingers. It was here that new initiates underwent their final test, a ceremony cloaked in fear and secrecy. Imagine yourself descending into that dark. The air is damp, tasting faintly of earth and iron. Every sound, dripping water, shuffling footsteps, the hollow thud of a closing door, echoes endlessly in the chamber. Ahead, a circle of elders waits, their faces half hidden by hood. A chalice, a dagger, a book of sacred words, all rest upon an altar carved into the stone. The initiate kneels, swears loyalty, and drinks from the cup. Whether wine, water, or a concoction laced with herbs, its taste lingers like a promise, and perhaps, like a curse. It was said that once an initiate joined, there was no turning back. To betray the brotherhood was to invite certain death. Their methods of enforcing loyalty were legendary. Whispers of a blade in the dark, a poisoned cup, or a fall that seemed like an accident. Even rulers feared crossing them, for they struck without warning, and melted back into obscurity. And yet, how did this shadowy society sustain itself for nearly 2 centuries? The answer lies in their mastery of psychology. Hassan and his successors understood the human mind better than most rulers of their age. They preyed on fear, faith, and ambition. Through stories of paradise they offered hope. Through selective violence they instilled terror. Through secrecy, they maintained an aura of invincibility. But perhaps their most dangerous weapon was myth itself. The assassins encouraged tales of their own power, letting rumors spread unchecked. Did they really train killers with drugs? Did they truly control visions of paradise? Or were these only stories crafted to make their enemies tremble? We may never know, and that uncertainty more than any blade was their greatest advantage. Centuries later, their enemies, particularly the Mongols, would storm Alamut and claim victory. Yet even as their strongholds fell, their legend refused to die. The word assassin would ripple through history, distorted, exaggerated, and romanticized until it became synonymous with fear and secrecy. But here is the unsettling question. If their order was truly destroyed, why do whispers of their survival persist? Why do certain records speak of hidden cells that scattered, reforming in distant lands? Could fragments of their network still have shaped events long after Alamut burned? The deeper we venture into their story, the less certain we become. Were the assassins merely a medieval sect, or the prototype of all modern clandestine organizations? Were they the shadows in the background of empires, the unseen hand guiding chaos? The silence of the tunnels beneath Alamut offers no answers, but sometimes silence speaks louder than words. The torchlight flickers lower now, as if even the flame itself grows wary of where the story leads. For we have followed the assassins from their cradle in the mountains of Persia, through centuries of whispered terror, into the collapse of their strongholds beneath the weight of Mongol steel. And yet, though their castles were reduced to ash, though their leaders slain or scattered, the story did not end there. Legends insist that fragments of the assassins survived. Some were absorbed into Sufi orders, disguising their teachings in layers of mysticism. Others, it is said, found refuge in the shadows of Cairo, or in the labyrinthine alleys of Damascus. From there, whispers suggest, their methods bled quietly into Europe, seeping into the guilds of spies, the courts of kings, and eventually the secret societies that would shape Renaissance and Enlightenment politics. The very idea of the lone fanatical assassin striking down rulers in the name of ideology echoes like a ghost throughout history. When the Duke of Burgundy was slain in 1419, when even modern leaders fell to the bullets of radicals, scholars wondered, was this the long shadow of Hassan Isaba? Had his dark legacy truly perished, or had it merely evolved, taking on new masks with every passing age? And here is where the tale sharpens into the unsettling present. In intelligence archives, fragments appear, letters, manuals and strategies eerily reminiscent of assassin doctrine. Strike the head, and the body withers. Let fear travel further than the blade. Words that could have been carved into the stones of Alamut resurface in modern strategies of psychological warfare. But perhaps the greatest mystery is this: did the assassins ever truly die, or do they still linger, hidden in the margins of our world? Imagine a meeting in a shadowed chamber, the faint smell of incense, a circle of cloaked figures reciting oaths, older than empires, a single dagger laid on the table between them, no name, no face, only loyalty to an idea. Could such a brotherhood still exist, watching, waiting, ready to strike where least expected? And yet, there is a deeper question, one that leaves the air colder than the blade itself. Were the assassins monsters, enslaving young men with drugs and vision? Or were they pioneers of psychological warfare, resisting empires that sought to crush their faith? To the Crusaders they were demons, to their followers they were saviors, to history they remain both nightmare and enigma. Their castles are ruins now, their banners reduced to... But if you stand upon the stones of Alamut, as the evening wind howls through broken towers, you may feel it, the weight of a presence that has never left, a reminder that secrecy, fear and belief can wield more power than any army. And so the story ends not with certainty but with a question: who truly holds the power in this world? The kings and armies we see, or the invisible hands we never glimpse, guiding history with whispers, daggers and shadows? The assassins may be gone, but their mystery endures. Perhaps even now, their eyes are upon us.